Welcome, guys, to another episode of Seen and Unseen. This is your host, Edgar Rack, and today, as always, we cross that line and look behind the veil. Now, if only I had $1 for every single time someone asked me what my zodiac sign was. And don't even get me started on zodiac relationship compatibility. I'm a Leo, you're a Taurus, we are destined to be together. And if any zodiac experts are listening to this, you're probably thinking, well, Leo and Taurus may not necessarily be compatible, etc., etc. All that nonsense. I swear, I couldn't make this up even if I wanted to. But once I spoke with a couple who tried making a baby on a certain month, so that he or she would be born in September and thus be a Virgo. I literally have no words. Astrology is a huge spiritual problem in today's society, and in this episode I will give you clear demonological reasons why it's as demonic as becoming a practicing Satanist. Yes, even if you check your horoscopes once a month, that still counts. First of all, the history of astrology is pretty straightforward. Ancient Mesopotamians didn't see the difference between a god and a celestial body. For them, a star or a planet represented a certain deity, a god. For example, and you can go and check it out yourselves, Saturn for them was god Ninurta, and Jupiter was Marduk, and so on. In ancient Mesopotamia, astrology wasn't originally a harmless personality system like modern newspaper horoscopes. Babylonian priests called Baru practiced divination by observing celestial phenomena and interpreting them as messages from the gods. So, when an ancient Babylonian watched Venus, for example, appear in the sky, he wasn't necessarily thinking, that's a planet reflecting the sunlight. He could understand it through a religious framework, the divine realms communicating something through Venus. And that's where astrology becomes religious. Ancient Mesopotamian scholars produced enormous collections of celestial omens. They watched eclipses, planetary movements, conjunctions, unusual stars, movements of the planets, positions of celestial bodies, and so on. Then they interpreted these phenomena as messages concerning earthly events. For example, an unusual celestial event could supposedly indicate the death of a king, or an upcoming war, or a political disaster. So the logic was essentially this: an event with stars or planets meant divine meaning, which meant, subsequently, earthly consequences. In their minds, celestial bodies corresponded to earthly reality. Mars was associated with war and aggression, Venus with love and sexuality, Jupiter with kingship and power, and Saturn with limitations and death. Later on, the Greeks inherited this worldview from Mesopotamians, and they also developed their own religious associations with stars and planets. So for them, Jupiter represented Zeus, Saturn became god Cronus, etc. And this wasn't merely poetic naming. The planets themselves became embedded in mythology and astrology. That's why we still have these names today. Even our word, planet, comes from the Greek planetes, meaning roughly wanderer, because planets appear to wander across the fixed stars. So, in other words, stars and planets were observed to determine and explain both the present and the future in terms of politics and religion. Now, if you're going to tell me that that was an ancient worldview of the stars, so we don't see them that way anymore, blah blah, then let me surprise you. In the world of zodiac science and astrology, stars are not viewed as gods anymore, that's granted. But they are still used to determine psychological and spiritual factors for both the present and the future. The ancient pagan world repeatedly interpreted celestial powers as divine beings and sought guidance from them. Scripture repeatedly warns Israel not to worship or consult the heavenly host. Therefore, when astrology takes celestial bodies and turns them into sources of hidden knowledge, destiny, and spiritual guidance, it resembles the very religious system Scripture commanded Israel to reject. Deuteronomy chapter 4 verse 19 warns Israel, "And beware lest you raise your eyes to the heaven, and when you see the sun and the moon and the stars, all the hosts of heaven, you be drawn away and bow down to them and serve them." Now, serving them does not necessarily mean bowing down to them. Trusting the position of the stars to guide your life and find compatibility with another person based on horoscopes already classifies as serving them, because you put your trust in them. Imagine living in the ancient Near East. You look around and see Babylon views the planet Venus as god Ishtar. Egypt views sun as god Ra. Canaan has Shamash, moon, and other divine powers. And Greece has Helios, Selene, and the Olympian gods represented in the stars and the other planets. And Israel's message is radically different. The sun is in God, the moon is in God, and the stars are in God. That is the creation of the only creator. So to put it simply, you're worshipping and trusting the creation rather than the creator. And thus the fundamental issue isn't simply, well, people believe planets have magical powers. No. In fact, it's the attempt to obtain hidden knowledge about human life through a supernatural system other than God. Demonologically, that puts astrology in the same broad biblical category as divination, omens, sorcery, necromancy, consulting mediums, and attempting to discover hidden knowledge through forbidden spiritual practices. And the Bible repeatedly condemns this type of activity. In Deuteronomy chapter 18, verses 10 to 12, it says, "There shall not be found among you anyone who practices divination or tells fortunes or interprets omens." And then it adds, "For whoever does these things is an abomination to the Lord." So in short, astrology is demonic not because stars themselves are evil, but because astrology takes something God created, the heavens, the stars, and the planets, and turns it into a mechanism for divination, guidance, identity, and prediction apart from God. Now, you might ask yourselves two questions. What about the Magi who found Jesus by following a star? That's one of the most common arguments the astrology experts give. And doesn't God use signs in the heavens? So let's begin with the first problem. First of all, yes, Magi did follow the star that you see on your Christmas cards to find Jesus in the manger. But notice the direction of the story. The star doesn't become their God. The celestial sign ultimately leads them to Christ. That's completely different from constructing a system in which planetary positions determine someone's personality, relationships, friendships, future, morality, or destiny. And there's an even more interesting theological point. The Magi eventually encounter revelation concerning Christ, rather than being told to continue consulting the stars. Which leads me to the other problem. Doesn't God use signs in the heavens? Absolutely he does. In Joel 2, you read, "The sun shall be turned to darkness, and the moon will be turned to blood." And Jesus himself speaks about signs in sun and moon and stars in Luke 21, verse 25. So Christianity isn't saying the heavens have no spiritual significance. It's quite the opposite, actually. You don't look at the stars to learn something about yourself, your character, like all Leos are self-centered, your future, or the best horoscope sign as a spouse for you. Instead, the stars are God's creation, so they can remind you how powerful, beautiful, and glorious God is. So instead of asking, what does this tell me about me? What's going to happen to me? Who should I date? What kind of person am I? What is my destiny? You should ask yourselves this. What does it tell me about God? So in astrology in general, the stars go from being something that points you towards God to becoming something you consult for guidance and hidden knowledge. In fact, in Isaiah 47, Babylon, which was famous for its occult practices, is even mocked and ridiculed for relying on astrologers. So it's not like stars and planets are evil. It's all about not seeking supernatural guidance from them. And a lot of times people like to point out that, well, it's just for fun, there's nothing serious, and so on. I literally met a lot of Christians who believed both in God and in zodiac compatibility in relationships. Spiritually, in the Bible, God has warned his people over and over again about not being involved in this type of activity. There is no such thing as innocent interest in astrology or just reading the horoscopes for fun. Like I said many times before, you do not have to worship Satan to be involved in a cult. And guess what? Astrology is a type of occult. Many occult systems present themselves as spirituality, self-discovery, cosmic energy, enlightenment, personal growth, ancient wisdom, or just entertainment. Sadly, a lot of serious occult practices are viewed as entertainment these days. Ouija boards, tarot cards, and also astrology. It's all just for fun. What can possibly go wrong, right? By the way, I cannot put it into words how stupid it sounds when someone says, well, I'm a Leo, so that's who I am by nature. Or I'm a Taurus, so that's why I'm so stubborn. Frankly, I believe even ancient astrologers would laugh at our interpretation of zodiac signs. So when we ask the question if zodiac signs and astrology is demonic, the answer is a firm yes. Again, not because stars and planets are demonic, no. It's because the interpretation of the stars is taking the place of God. We use the stars to determine our character, our nature, friendships, relationships, present, future, and our life choices. We quote-unquote innocently use something that has been used as divination to connect to and worship other gods, demons. Something that has been used for interpretation of times, present and future, to gain knowledge outside of God and His guidance. And ironically, we use it in the exactly same way. Only now we call it innocent hobby. But the core of this occult practice remains the same. Involvement in any type of astrology is never innocent, and it's never without spiritual consequences. Now, my friends, with this podcast, I'm only touching the tip of the iceberg. If you're serious about moving past the surface level and understanding the actual mechanics of spiritual warfare and the true legal boundaries of the unseen realm, the doors to my seen and unseen community are open. Inside, you can find real, verified field case studies from my 15 years of research, access step-by-step training modules, and get direct, raw answers from me personally. The link is right down in the description below. As for now, I hope you have enjoyed this episode, and we have crossed the line. Keep your eyes open. This was Seen and Unseen, and I will see you in the next episode.